All right, welcome everybody back to the PHLY Sixers podcast. Joined once again by Kyle Neubeck. How you doing, Kyle?
Damn, I thought you were going to do the like and subscribe 2 shows in a row. Too much to hope for, but happy Friday, everybody. Thank you for being here, obviously, if you're here with us. Derek and I are so grateful you somehow chose to spend 5 days of your 5 during the week with us. That's pretty amazing. If you're here, obviously hit that subscribe button. Give us a nice thumbs up. And I can already see that the Dame Lillard Nation is joining us in the chat. And Derek, I think it's, regardless of where we both sit here, I think probably fair to characterize it as a wild week of Dame Lillard trade rumors, what's out there, what's maybe not out there, what you're trying to piece together, get through. It just, I feel like every hour, a couple hours, I'm hearing something new that sounds insane or maybe completely rational.
Yeah, I think there was a lot of talk yesterday, a very significant talk about maybe this Damian Lillard situation being sort of completed by the time training camp rolls around. Certainly nobody giving a guarantee, but that there were talks to make that happen. Maybe the most prominent, John Gambadoro. He is a radio host at 98.7 FM in Phoenix, basically saying, and this was while he was talking about a potential Ayton swap for Nurkic, but saying that this would be contingent on a Lillard trade and that he expects that trade to happen very soon. There was also Danny Meringue, who says that there are discussions about trade underway, about a trade that could be completed by training camp. So, and some other things, other people sort of jumping on that bandwagon. I think those are two most prominent, but it's certainly a sentiment that is out there.
I see Jacob in the comments saying, I'm not sure anything about this offseason counts as completely rational. I think that's 100%. Maybe the savviest comment 100%. That's been made in the stream.
No, that's fair.
Since we started. So that's completely fair. To Derek's point, though, I mean, the rumors that this is heating up are coming from people that I think, Gambo, I think he gets referred to as a radio guy, and often that's used
He's got a good
pejoratively.
track record on the Suns.
He has a very good Phoenix Suns track record. And so if he's saying, there's some smoke building and this might happen with Phoenix, I always tend to lend that some credence. I think that's, he knows what's going on there. And so you hear that from him. Obviously, there was the Zach LaVine stuff that I reported on the show earlier in the week that I got the windy. Don't aggregate me, but not quite as angry as Wendy tends to get with that stuff. And there's just, I guess the big question, and it was the headline of our show, Derek, is do you think all this focus on Dame it applies to James Harden with the Sixers, but is it putting the rest of the market in a state of paralysis until that domino falls?
I think it certainly has an impact. And I think that's true whether or not the Sixers are involved in these trade discussions either directly or as a third or fourth team. But I think it's true just in the market in general. Like, I think teams naturally focus on the biggest fish out in the sea. And while that's still on the board, they're not going to reveal their best hand for the second or third biggest trade trip that might be out there. But on the other hand, I also think James has been mercurial enough and has such a narrow base of teams that will have an interest in him that I'm not sure it's going to, I'm not sure if the Dame trade does happen, that all of a sudden the floodgates are going to open and James Harden, you're going to get good. I don't want to present it as that, but certainly while Dame is on the market, I think how can it not have an impact?
We have Finney Chase in the comments saying that he's going to tell people that I said Clippers, Blazers, Sixers 3-team trade. And now I quite literally said that on a microphone. I will say this. There was some, I wouldn't call it speculation. There was some smoke out there today regarding Dame to the Sixers and that maybe the Sixers' involvement in this process has been underplayed. I wouldn't go quite that far yet. I know, here's what I can tell you that I know for sure. I know that the Sixers have certainly talked to the Blazers about Dame at different points throughout this offseason, but that's also, I'd say to you guys all the time, talking to someone and saying, hey, we would like Dame Lillard on our basketball team is not, we're putting together a credible trade package for Dame Lillard. Those are two very distinct ideas. I think the Sixers have also made clear throughout this offseason that Tyrese Maxey is their guy, that the message they've sent to a lot of people is that they're basically not trading him for anything. Now, Derek, I think you
What's
can probably...
we could do the windy thing.
Yeah.
If Giannis, they called about Giannis,
Yeah,
he's
right.
not
If they
available.
called about
Probably Michael
Giannis-
Jordan, yeah.
Yeah, and look, we can sit here and exaggerate and say they're not
Why
going
is
to trade
Windy
him.
catching so many strays?
I
He's
love
catching
Windy.
I
Windy's
love
the
him
best.
too. He's great. He's very nice to us. He's very
Great reporter,
loves
great
basketball.
guy.
Yep.
Yeah, all that stuff. So let's be clear on that front.
But he's pretty memeable, if we're being honest.
Yes.
Yeah.
So anyway, point being, I think the Sixers would tell you Tyrese is our guy.
Right.
And they're not even humoring the idea of if Dame rumor is out there, it's not like, oh, we're humoring that. They shoot that down immediately.
And everybody with 2 functioning brain cells knows the only way the Sixers could get Dame is by including Maxey.
Correct.
The Sixers have to downplay any talks out of hand. Completely.
That's just sort of how it goes. So where the truth actually falls on this stuff, we're only going to know essentially as a trade breaks here. I think what I've heard from people out of Portland is, and Portland-based reporters have certainly told you this themselves, is that it seems like Joe Cronin really doesn't want to trade Dame to Miami. That organizationally, Portland is saying they don't want to capitulate to the one team or bust mentality. And look, if Miami were to make a more compelling offer, if they're putting more stuff on the table and they're getting them to a place where Portland feels more comfortable with that, then okay. I think where the Blazers...
Not Ben asking about Zach LaVine. We devoted almost a whole podcast
we
to that.
did
Buddy.
talk
Go
a lot
back
about
couple
Zach
days.
LaVine
Yeah.
this week. I can only talk so much about Zach LaVine. So
Come on, hit that. Now that's a guy who needed to hit that subscribe button because he did not
exactly.
listen to the
Come
previous
on,
podcast.
not Ben. We need you to get in the boat and listen to all the shows and not just the Friday shows. But anyway, the point being, I think everything that's out there suggests that Portland does not want to do the Miami deal, that they're essentially holding out because they don't think that Miami deal is good enough. And so that's given opportunities to a team like Toronto, who there's been some buzz about them this week, team like Chicago, who the reporting is there from yours truly. Certainly Derek has heard some of the same stuff I have. And it's just kind of this Wild West like standoff right now. Everyone's got guns pointed at each other and they're saying who's going to throw in that extra pick or that extra young player. And again, I think Portland's position here for having a disgruntled star is fairly strong because, one, I think they know that Dame is not going to actually be a malcontent. I think that he would probably be, if you're talking about a star player in this situation, he's probably the best guy to have there.
Right.
But also, if Dame didn't show up day one or says, I'm
trying
not
to lose
playing,
anyway.
who cares?
Yeah.
They're going to tank and they want draft picks. And hey, look at that. Not Ben says, I just subscribed. Derek just pitched him on.
A case of cyberbullying being working in our favor.
That is proper hosting right there. So thank you to Not Ben. But yeah, so I think Portland is certainly in the driver's seat right now. And until somebody, like let's say the Sixers woke up one day and said, hey, Tyrese is available and we can flip him for XYZ, this many picks, and send them, then maybe it becomes a more urgent situation. But until then, this is just going to keep going and around we go.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I guess going back to sort of like the whole Dame thing, like you said, the Sixers will deny that Tyrese Maxey is available for anyone in the trade. Anyone. Is he? I don't know. I know what they want us to believe. I know that they have to have Tyrese Maxey believe that, and it might even be true. I think where I would stand on that is I don't know. And I think they're going to be very, if you're going to aggregate this, I'm saying if any team ever did believe that Tyrese Maxey was going to be available, the Sixers have to deny it. It's just where you stand in terms of trying to keep a player happy, especially one who is represented by Rich Paul, coming in the final year of a contract, has been told he's not having his contract extended right now. It's like you said the other day, it's a very tight line to walk. And so my position is I know what they're saying. I know the messaging they want around that. And that may or may not be true. I honestly don't know. And I think the best thing I can do in my situation is not pretend that I know. Because really only Daryl Morey, maybe a select few people within the organization, truly know. My guess, and it's just a guess, I think he would prefer to have Harden and Maxey over Dame. But what happens if you get to a point where that isn't a realistic outcome? Does that change? I truthfully don't know. It's an interesting thought experiment. Right now, it will be a thought experiment up until a Dame trade actually happens.
Yeah, I agree. And look, I think the signals have been sent by the organization saying that the best case scenario for them right now is to get James Harden happy, get everybody back on board, and go from there for the season. There's just not really. Maybe you could make up a fake scenario where Joe Cronin gets a concussion and says, we'll trade you Dame for nothing. But in all realistic, reasonable scenarios, we're talking about the best path forward is not run it back because they switched a lot of role players in and out, but to go forward with the roster they have. James Harden is happy. James Harden kind of gets on board and says, I like these guys. I believe in what Nick Nurse is selling. And you kind of go from there. But I suspect that's not going to be a popular plan with the fan base because and this is true, nothing will have changed and they'll be moving forward in a scenario where no one really has extra belief or something coming in from out of nowhere that's like, okay, now this is propelling them past round 2. And so
do you think that's what happened with the Wolves last year? They got a concussion right before the Gobert trade?
Wow. I don't know what happened with the Rudy Gobert trade because they essentially broke the trade market for everybody. And I've been thinking about that a lot as we talk about the new CBA and the ramifications of that. Rudy Gobert essentially was traded for a franchise's complete draft future, right?
And a young player, too.
And a young player who's a very good one. And so once you do that, you look at somebody like a Dame Lillard or a Joel Embiid in a scenario where he were to get traded. You don't even have enough to trade for the guy. If you're saying that trade needs to be the Joel equivalent of the Gobert trade, you just can't do it. So It's the market in general is broken, and I'm not sure how you fix it exactly, but I don't think the Dame trade is going to solve that.
Absolutely.
So is it time for our first break, you think?
I believe it is.
Yeah, let's talk about our good friends at DraftKings Sportsbook. I hope I nailed the disclaimer just like I did yesterday. I got to tell you guys, we're back with another week of football, and DraftKings Sportsbook keeping us in on the NFL action. Great offers every single game day. New customers bet $5, get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw 5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. I hope you guys are betting on the Eagles this week because, we all support the birds around these parts. But even if you aren't, DraftKings is not stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. And football is more fun when you're in on the action. So download the app now. Sign up with code PHLY. New customers can bet just $5 to get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code PHLY. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly on behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas. Licensee partner Golden Nugget, Lake Charles, Louisiana. 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. Really in a groove over here.
You know who's going to need to do real good at that? The Wolves, when they're paying Rudy Gobert $44 million.
They need to know all those eligibility and deposit restrictions, I think, because they got to make that money back somehow.
Not only do they give up a real good young player in Kessler, not only give up all those draft picks, but the right to pay him $44 million next year to put next to Towns.
And I'm not a Rudy Gobert fan as a general.
As like a 15, 20 million per game guy in a limited offensive role, sure, he can impact winning.
Papa says more disclaimers than my mortgage. Listen, man, we got a lot of people listening in a lot of places, so all those different sports gambling rules apply differently in Kansas and Ontario and here in our great state of Pennsylvania. So got to get them all in.
Got to get them in there. All right, sort of the other trade discussion that's going on, a lot of conversation about Buddy Hield, as we talked about the other day. And recently, just yesterday, Shams Charania reported that Hield would be someone who would fit, and he mentioned Dallas, Philly, and Milwaukee. Mentioned they could definitely use a shooter like that, and then mentioned that there had a level of interest in him this offseason. So I think we have sort of heard a little chatter in that regard. What are you hearing about Buddy?
Yeah, so I think what has been out there on the Sixers end on Buddy is, I don't want to say it's thanks but no thanks, but I think they sort of believe, as you and I talked about on the show, I wrote about Friday morning, that the trade packages, one way or the other for Buddy, just don't really work and fit with their plans. I think Buddy as a concept, as a player, you just plug him into a role, makes sense in Philadelphia, as we got into the other day. Nope. But you factor in the contract, you factor in what Philadelphia would have to send the other way, or if it is a Tobias-based trade, for example, I think the contracts and the extra bit of long-term money that would come to Philly as a result, I think for that reason, the Sixers are, we'll say it, throwing cold water on the idea of Buddy Hield. Now, that doesn't mean it's impossible. I think it all, really to me, the swing factor here is Buddy okay being an expiring guy, or does he really want to get to, does him and his representation want to get him to a place where he's signing that extension and he's with that team moving forward? If he's okay with this being kind of a prove it year and look, the Sixers are the prove it team, essentially. It's all expiring contracts, whether it's guys who have been here long term or signing 1-year deals. I think he could find a home here, but it just doesn't sound that likely to me where we sit right now.
Yeah. And certainly I've had similar conversations to you where it sounds like nothing imminent, nothing really significant at this time. Does that mean there's no interest? I'm not sure I'd say there's no interest, but I think what I would say, I think it might be more
low interest
interesting.
Would probably be.
Yeah. And I think it might be more interesting if you get to the point where, all right, that extension is out the window and he has to live with the fact that he's on expiring. If the trade doesn't happen anytime soon, could that then pick up in December, in sometime after the season starts? That might be a little more interesting, but certainly I don't think, for the reasons you stated, I just don't think they're going to want to commit the money that he would want for next year. And I truthfully don't know how much interest they even have in him. So I don't think, I think that might be overstated a little bit by some of the reports. But I think there was a little bit of connecting the dots. Like, all right, he's on the market. Sixers could use a shooter. Movement shooters obviously work around Joel.
Yeah.
We'll see. But no, I don't think anything imminent for sure.
Well, and you know how the game goes too. Like agents are involved in this sort of framing, right? When their guy wants out of somewhere, they can look at a roster on Basketball Reference the same way you and I could and say, oh, it looks like they don't have many shooters. I think that's a team that might have some interest. And you play some games of telephone with various reporters and people in the media, and all of a sudden it's, hey, the Sixers or the Mavericks or the Bucks or whoever else might have interest. Now, that's not to say that there's not actual theoretical interest.
I mean, right now there's two sides that would want to overstate any team's interest, not just the Sixers. The Pacers and Buddy Hield's representation would want to overstate as many teams as they can to get the ball rolling. Again, does that mean that there's no chance? I wouldn't say that. I just don't know. I don't think there's anything close. It's just all I would say.
So circling back to Dame and Harden a little bit, we did have a question a little further up. I believe it was if Miami strikes out on, there it is, from Brennan. If Miami strikes out on Dame, could they go after Harden?
That would be entertaining, wouldn't it?
It would be entertaining.
Can you imagine Jimmy and Harden?
No, so that's what I was going to say. To me, the biggest problem with that theoretical, look, Pat Riley loves big name, big time players. James Harden, for whatever his weaknesses are, still qualifies as that. I think the issue there is that Jimmy and James Harden are basically oil and water.
I will wear shorts in November if it's nice enough to wear shorts. Don't worry about that.
I respect Derek showing off his legs on the podcast. Mine are a little paler than his.
And honestly, part of it, I looked at the forecast. It's supposed to be in like the mid 60s and raining for the next week. So like I had to do it today.
Derek, you wear whatever the heck. Well, okay, I won't say that. Within reason, wear whatever the hell you want on this set, and that's fine with me. Whether our wonderful, beautiful viewers.
It is weird though. Like I have to wear pants now podcasting. I never had to do that before. It's an adjustment. It's an adjustment. All right, go ahead.
So back to Jimmy and James. I think Jimmy and James is a potentially just destructive combo in terms of the personality clash. I think Jimmy is a no nonsense, always on, switch flipped on type of guy.
And by the way, like, might he play that up for reporters or the camera? Sure. But it's also real. Like, that's a real part of his personality.
Yes, he is a guy behind the scenes that is a lot to deal with. And sometimes that's a good thing, right? Like, he he does work really hard, but there's also the part of it that's like, this guy doesn't shut the hell up sometimes.
Yeah.
And that
Can you imagine
people,
podcasting with him? Oh, he'd be
my God.
insufferable.
Be worse than you.
But I mean, he would be working hard. He would just,
So, yeah, I think that's problem number one. Problem number two is that Rich likes to say this. The Heat essentially run their franchise like the military.
Yeah.
They're closer to like being in the Army than they are most basketball teams in the way that they hit conditioning and just breaking people down to the simplest level and building them back up. Now, clearly that's borne out some great results for them, right? They've exceeded expectations in the playoffs time and time again.
It is funny. We spent so many years like making fun of Heat culture as a concept, and then they overperform every playoff.
Listen, I have to submit myself to Heat culture, I suppose. But I think the problem is James is not the sort of guy that I can see buying into the all-encompassing Heat culture in that way.
James has a pretty clear pattern where he embraces a star, a co-star, everything is great, I'm bought in, and then flicks, and he's out pretty quickly. He would be out of Jimmy Butler and Miami and Spo in, I feel like, a week and a half. Like, it would be an all-time record. And it seems like each iteration gets shorter and shorter and shorter. And this, I can't. And I can't imagine Spo and Jimmy and Riley just being like, yes, this guy we want to bet on. And it might end up being like, Lowry is clearly not what they were. They don't have any depth.
Correct.
They might, I guess it's not impossible that they would be like, well, you got to try something. Because I think they're clearly a worse team than they were last year. I would just be stunned if this is the gamble.
Well, and part of why they're a worse team than last year is because they've been waiting. Yeah. Essentially, they've treated Dame coming to Miami as if it's set in stone. And maybe they're right to act that way. I mean, certainly Dame and his people want them to believe that. We're getting some wild comments today.
Well, I saw a mention of Austin.
The people are roasting Austin Krell for his terrible food takes. We've got people calling people nerds. I don't know what's going on here. Talking about Bodner's shorts. This is a true Friday show. We did have a comment. Where was it? It was somebody. It was Kenneth called Dame slightly overrated, or was I don't understand the Dame hype. Shooting 32 to 37% three-point range every year. Here's what I would say to that. His 37% is not PJ Tucker's 37%.
He's an elite shooter at 37%.
It is not a guy who's standing in the corner and doing nothing other than, I'm going to take one catch and shoot 3.5 or maybe even a game in some circumstances. This is a player who bends the floor because teams are not comfortable leaving him open from 35 feet away from the basket on a pull-up shot. And look, you're going to have lower percentages on those shots, right? You're not going to hit pull-up threes from 30 feet at a 40% clip. But because teams believe that he can, get into that stratosphere, and once Dame gets hot, is borderline unguardable, that opens up so much space in the middle of the floor. And if you think about what that would do for Joel Embiid, even if a team has to tag him and double him on an entry pass, then you're getting a wide open three for PJ. You're getting a wide open three for Tyrese Maxey, whoever it is. And so I don't think Dame is overrated offensively at all. If anything, I think there have been times when he's been underrated because the stats do not tell the whole story there.
And even just that one right there, like over the past 8 years, Dame shot 37.4% from three on 9.1 attempts per game. He's had 6 of his last 8 seasons, he has shot over 37%. So that variability that they were referencing, it's really not. It was 1 year where he shot 32% because he was injured for most of the year. Other than that, he's been a back of the baseball. Like, he's been very consistent in terms of his shooting, especially for a guy who's taking it at that volume and at that degree of difficulty. When you have somebody, I mean, we see it with Tyrese. When you have somebody where every time they set a screen for him, you're terrified, that puts a lot of pressure on a defense. These are not catch and shoot threes. These are much tougher. I think if you're underrating Dame as a offensive player, I think you're making a big mistake. What I would say is a concern is he's being paid a lot of money. He's 33 years old, and he has had some injury history in the past. So you could say, look, you might have 1 or 2 years of elite Dame left, and then you're going to have a really bad contract or injured player. I get those concerns a lot. Not the offensive ones. He's an elite offensive player.
For sure. And Miles alluded to the fact that he believes he's overrated in the playoffs specifically. And look, I think what you would say there is that the degree of difficulty for a small guard in the playoffs is really high, right? We've seen it with Tyrese against a team like Boston, really struggles to beat physical pressure defense. And in the playoffs, when guys can get up on you more, when the officials let more contact go, I could absolutely buy that Dame is going to struggle more than, the average superstar guard, we'll say. But look, you might win 58, 60 games in a, high variance outcome for, Joel and Dame together. Or if you put Dame with Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, instead of having to fight their way out of the home court advantage with Milwaukee and all these other teams, they might be the number one seed in the East, and they might get to cakewalk to the conference finals, not have to, play without home court the entire time. And that's a big deal.
He's had some really good playoff runs too.
Sure.
Like I think his play, like there
big
have been
playoff moments,
single games, maybe a series here or there, but like it's not like something. I really don't want to pick on him. It's not like something like Joel right now, where like you don't have a real crowning moment to turn to. He's had some really good runs. He can do it. He has done it. I think he's fantastic.
I do too. All right, we'll take another quick break to talk about our friends at Game Time. At least maybe my friend Derek hasn't talked about.
I don't
our
have
friends at Game Time.
That's not true.
We're not
when
friends.
When you weren't here for 2 days, I did the Game Time.
Oh, okay. All right, that sounds good. Well, when Derek and I want to go see a Broadway show together, or go to a Phillies game, or one of the many events that you feel stress over trying to get tickets for, the Game Time app is always there for you. It's a fast and easy way to buy tickets for any of the events you might want to go to. Killer deals, best price guarantee. I mean, it's really unbelievable, but I can believe it because I've seen the deals myself and been able to go to some recent Phillies games as a result of that. I think it's the place for last minute deals. It's the fastest growing ticketing app in the country for good reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you get there. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. And look, that's a really great thing. I've been to you go down to a tailgate for an Eagles game, and maybe you don't expect you're going to the game. You can pull up the Game Time app and say, hey, look, there are some cheap tickets for today. Maybe I can get in there and make a whole day out of it. And those tickets get sent directly to your phone, never have to dig through your email. So you can snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code PHLY for $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code PHLY for $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed. So it seems like, we're really on Dame Island here today. It looks like, that's really nice of Phillies 0708 says, we'll be your friend, Derek. See, you're already adding some friends just by having the people here in the comments with us, Derek. That's a really nice thing.
You're one of one. I appreciate you.
What a community we're building here. So you got any more thoughts on Dame? Because we are...
I just kind of want to... Going back to sort of like how you started the podcast, I would like for this to be resolved just so we can have some certainty going into the NBA season, so we can have some certainty of what to talk about, so we can just sort of like move forward. I do like these sort of... At least last year with Durant, they just said, all right, we're done. Like, we'll revisit this at the deadline, but we're done. Kevin Durant came back. We had a little bit of a resolution coming into camp. You knew what to talk about. Like you knew how to plan.
These are the teams. This is what the Eastern Conference looks like.
Imagine being like a schedule maker in the NBA. You don't know if how the Sixers or the Clippers are going to look in 6 months. Like it's got to be real tough.
Well, Will is asking for an Austin Krell appearance on an episode. We might have to have him in here in the studio just to make fun of all his... We can make a list of all his terrible food takes and go one by one. And then just from buttered noodles to the Chipotle cheese quesadilla.
Now, they do let us go over an hour on these shows.
Look at this. The people want Krell. We have Luca. We want Krell for an episode.
I don't think you guys really mean that. Or at least after the show, you won't have meant that. We can have Austin on sometime.
We'll talk it over with production. We'll see what they say, but who knows? Well, so here's what I would say. We'll see if we can put a bow on the Dame specific conversation. I think if you're saying maybe the Sixers get in at some point and it's a last minute, hey, he's still out there, let's just kick the tires and see what happens. The sales pitch is that he will do all the end game stuff that is hard for Joel to do, right? And it's very easy, as we've seen in the playoffs over the years, for a team to simply deny Joel the ball, hard double him on the catch, so on and so forth. You can hard double Dame as he crosses half court, but then you're playing 4-on-3 and you have the rim in front of you.
And especially since Sixers have so many good quick decision makers, they can take it. All right, never mind.
Wow, okay. You're really putting the
I mean, that's not a comment on Dame.
It's Friday, man. You're in shorts and a t-shirt over here. We're trying to have a little fun over here. Let people dream a little bit. So, yeah, I think all I'm getting at is that Dame is the guy that they need to bridge that. Look, Joel can win you a ton of games in the regular season, and the way he plays in the regular season, that there's proof of concept for it, right? Yep. What we haven't seen is the ability for him to do that in the playoffs, and part of that is just it's inherently hard to win that way with the way teams are able to defend him come playoff time. And so whether it's acquiring somebody like Dame, if it's Maxey making that leap, which, look, there is a pretty big gulf, as much as I love Tyrese, between him and Dame right now. I think the shooting gap is not as big as I would have believed it could be a few years ago, but in terms of the playmaking and all the other stuff and just the pull-up confidence, that stuff would have to come a reasonably far way for him to get there. But that's the difference. I just think the more you see Joel in the playoffs, the harder it is to believe he can be just like the true 1A alpha offensively on a contending team.
If you were ranking like the top 5 players, top 5 perimeter players who you would pair next to Joel Embiid for the next 2 years, is Dame on that list?
He might be number 1, honestly.
Well, Steph and KD, I think, are probably up there.
That's fair.
Once you get past those, and by the way, they're not, to my knowledge, or maybe it broke while we were on this podcast, to my knowledge, are not available for a trade, Steph and KD.
No. Joel loves to say that's his favorite hypothetical.
He would trade himself for
Clay
and
Steph Curry.
Yeah.
He just loves that.
So outside of that, and like there might be some others that you would put on there, maybe Tatum just because he's more of a two-way guy, has a little more size, a little easier for him in the playoffs, maybe, sure. There aren't that many you get to before like Dame's at the top.
Yeah.
And he's actually available, whereas those other guys are completely off the table. And there are very significant concerns. I don't want to, in part because like if you end up some variation of a trade where you trade away Harden and Maxey, you don't have much depth. But in part because Dame might, these kinds of players, once they start aging, we see it with Harden and the fact that he can't finish at the rim.
Yeah.
You can hit a cliff pretty quickly and pretty unexpectedly. I fully acknowledge that. And I'm not even sure if I would do a Harden and Maxey if it was available trade, although I tend to take those kinds of swings. You're giving up a lot of career for Tyrese Maxey. It would be really, really tough. But I can't dismiss it either because Dame is just such a great fit.
So some semi-breaking news here. The Woj made an appearance today on ESPN, said that talks have intensified this week with Damian Lillard. Still no trade imminent. And here's the important part, which we were getting at a little bit earlier. So far, the one element that has not been a part of these talks are the Miami Heat. And so the Blazers are clearly sending a message. Like,
yes. And you can,
the Miami Heat
right,
is
and
essentially
you can see
what
where
Portland is saying.
The leaks
right
are
now.
coming from. Like,
Yes.
if you don't, get off the pot, like you're going to lose Dame.
Yeah, right. Yeah. Like I think other teams have seen this drag on. And look, I keep bringing up Masai and what he did with Kawhi. He's shown he's willing to take this type of risk. If he believes there is a difference-making star out there, I think that Toronto might make that move. And I think Chicago, another team, what the hell are they doing anyway? They're stuck in no man's land. Like, why wouldn't you try to take a risk? And then Dame is a guy who can draw people to him. Like, I think that if you put Dame in not Portland, like Portland seems like a lovely place,
it's
but
a lot to overcome. Yeah.
It is just not a.
And by the
NBA.
way, Portland is lovely. I've been there. I adore Portland.
I am not disparaging Portland in any way, but you just look at how the NBA operates. It's not a place that guys go who are like real stars, right? It's the whole reason that Portland has held on to him for this long and is causing such a fuss that they're not going to trade him to Miami is because it's so hard for them to get and retain, which is the important part, a player of Dame's caliber. So,
I do. One of my favorite things is it seems to be coming from Miami Heat related bloggers or writers But, oh, man, if you don't trade him to Miami, you're never getting a free agent to come. It's like, well, they're not getting free agents anyway, first of all. And second of all, then they go like, all right, well, maybe when Scoot's contract's up, he's not going to want to stay. Like, no, if he can get the most money from Portland, he's not going to be like, oh, man, they didn't treat Dame well
Scoot's
4 years ago.
Scoot's not turning down $200+ million from the Blazers.
Well, thank you for the Supermax. But no, you know what? Somebody that I barely knew was disrespected. No, that's not. Stop.
I see Gavin wants to trade Ferk and Ricky Council the fourth for Dame. You know, I think the Blazers might ask for Jaden Springer too, but you have the
That's
basis.
Where you draw the line?
You have the basis for a trade package there. Yeah, look, so this is the message coming out of Portland right now. They do not want to do business with Miami. Maybe it's because they're being stubborn. Maybe it's because they just don't want to give in to all the public pressure. But I think the bottom line is there is not an offer from Miami on the table right now that they think matches Dame's value. And so that has opened this opportunity, whether it's the Raptors, the Bulls, the Sixers potentially, any of these teams that have a credible shot to trade for Dame, now's your time to take it because this is dragging on long enough that Miami might just, have gotten a little too cute with this thing.
Yeah. We'll see. I'm interested to see how it plays out, in part because you just want to see, and even if it's not straight up for Dame, like Daryl is always looking for ways to add an asset or two. He'll make calls to see if he can get into a multi-team trade. Interested to see how it plays out for the Sixers. Interested to see how it plays out for the NBA. Just move on with life. It'll be fun.
So Brennan has a question. If the Sixers got Dame, would it take the Harden Clips? Harden is still on the roster. Do you think he stays around? I don't think you can. No. I don't think it's a Dame and Harden thing. I think the only path is moving Harden and most likely more stuff in order to get Dame back.
And I mean, part of the problem with Portland as a trade partner is that there is some overlap there with Tyrese Maxey. So who knows what their level of interest would even be theoretically. Having another draft pick or two from a Harden trade would certainly help facilitate that. There would be a lot of moving parts that you'd have to figure out. But I don't think there's much of a chance because James Harden's problem with the Sixers isn't that they can't contend. It's that they didn't give him the contract that he wanted, so he wants to go to a team that will give him that contract. I don't think that's changing. Yeah,
and so just as like a broad framework, if they were to try to pull off a 3-team deal, the issue, we're theoretically including Maxey in this deal. First problem, Maxey and Anthony Simons and Scoot are just like, there's nothing you can do with the three of them that gets the most out of them at the same time. So that's problem number one. If you're tying in the Clippers and Harden is going there and you're going to reroute Clippers stuff to Portland doesn't really have a need in a tanking year for the sake of argument, Norm Powell or Terrence Mann or Marcus Morris or whoever these vet guys on mid-sized contracts are that you would flip there. And so you're wish casting essentially. You're trying to create a trade that really doesn't make sense for anybody except for James Harden and the Sixers. So that's the problem there.
All right. Before we get to the last little ad read here, make sure that you leave any questions you have there in the chat. We have a spirited debate going on in there between Wills about my shorts, about Austin Krell, but maybe drop some Sixers questions in there as well, and we will try to get to them here in that last segment. Before we get to that, though, a word from FOCO. FOCO is a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. It's the best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms. And with us now squarely in football and tailgating season, that means more overalls, hoodies, hats, sunglasses, bags, everything you need for a game FOCO has. And FOCO has hooked PHLY up and provided awesome pieces for our sets. FOCO always has our backs for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. For all non-presale items, use our promo code PHLY for 10% off. I feel like we started off with Dame, briefly went to Buddy, came back to Dame pretty quickly. Do you have any expectations here that anything might be resolved shortly? Just to wrap this up, I think we
listen. If Woj is saying it's not imminent, then I trust him as much as I trust myself, basically. So.
I trust Woj more than you.
Yeah, well, listen, you're not me, so. But yeah, if Woj is saying nothing is imminent, then I would say that's. Here we go. There's some great questions coming in, by the way.
There we go.
But yeah, the talks are certainly heating up, but I have to say 100 times every show, it feels like talking and making a trade are two things. And Portland is clearly trying to send this impression that we are not doing anything. We are not going to make a single move with Dame unless we get the Godfather offer from wherever we end up sending him. I think they have rejected the concept of like, oh, we owe Dame this to send him to just this one place. I certainly don't think they're not going to send Dame to like, NBA Siberia. He's not going to Charlotte or wherever.
Yeah.
But I don't think they subscribe to the belief that, oh, we have to send him to Miami or we're fucked as a franchise.
Yeah, I agree. We have one question here from Gavin. He wants to know which PHLY podcast we were on a 2-versus-2 basketball tournament.
I would hope we would
I
win.
think
We are the
have
basketball
a chance.
show.
I think we have a chance. We certainly have the size.
We have the height advantage in basically any matchup.
I'll take Zebra right down to the weight room.
Oh, listen, I will throw you that ball in the post and wait to clang a jumper when you get double teamed down there. But I'm not trying to talk up my basketball skills or anything, but I would be pretty ashamed of myself if, as the basketball pod, we lost a 2-on-2 game to any of the other podcasts. No disrespect or shade to any of the gang here, who I'm sure are athletic and wonderful in their own regard.
Yep. Let's see what else. There's a question on Petrushev. Do you expect him to be able to crack the rotation?
Well, here's the question right now. Is he going to make the roster?
That's a much better question.
Right?
Yeah.
Like
that was from RC, by the way.
Yeah. So RC, I think if he's able to make the roster, I think is the bigger hurdle. And if he makes the roster, I think it would be because he showed a level of shooting in camp and preseason that maybe we haven't seen here. Right? Like I think for him to get minutes, he's going to have to offer something different that the other bigs don't. And no disrespect to Paul Reed's, work in the gym shooting this summer. I'm not expecting Paul Reed to show up and be like a 35% NBA three-point guy. So Petrusev, his whole thing is he's going to have to knock down shots. That's his potential differentiator in the rotation. That's the only way he gets in there. And frankly, I think it's the only way he's going to be on this roster.
Yeah. And look, I think the top 3 slots in terms of backup centers or in terms of centers are pretty locked in with Joe, Paul Reed, and Bamba.
Yeah.
So I think it's going to be tough for hhim to make the squad, if I'm being completely honest, especially now that they have gone out, added Danny Green, added Oubre.
We got Petrusev is the new Furkan Aldemir from
He's more
Jacob.
skilled than Furkan.
I would say I give him more credit than
Furkan.
that. I think he's got some real touch. I think, look, Furk was a good rebounder where he played, but certainly not at the NBA level.
Yeah.
And that was kind of his signature skill.
Yeah.
So.
And that was pretty close to his only skill. Yeah. What else do we have here?
Got a lot of questions. They're coming so fast and furious. I don't know, man. People are saying Berman is a hooper. So
I got a lot of pushback on that comment. A lot of people praising Zach's post defense. I don't know. We'll have to see it.
Brennan asked, what's the status with the Oubre deal? Woj said expected, not that he signed. That's
gonna
very
happen.
common.
Yeah.
The deal's agreed to. It normally takes, frankly, in the offseason, it's a lot of like when these guys stop taking vacation and can come in and physically sign a deal and go through a physical.
Look at Marcus Bagley. They agreed to an Exhibit 10 contract with him back in June after the draft.
I was the one who reported it initially, I think.
It just got finalized yesterday, I think.
Yeah. So, I mean, look, I'd say generally speaking, if there was an issue, one of us would probably tell you guys before you would start worrying about it.
Don't read anything into the fact that it isn't official yet.
Yeah.
Is what I would say.
We got the classic Sal Imagine Dragons question.
Here's my question for you. This is a question coming from me. Is he only in here to see if we will say that on air, or does he actually want to listen?
I don't.
How committed to the bit do you think he is?
Sal, I think Sal's my guy. He asked me the Imagine Dragons question on Twitter in the chat, so I believe that he is a true blue listener and loves the Sixers and maybe even sort of likes one or both of us. But
whoa, don't go too far.
There's no real way of knowing, I guess. Alex Macwood has a good question. What are your favorite potential lineups that Nick Nurse may use? I'll throw that to you first.
I would like to see the starting lineup. Let's back off. I'm not saying he should start, but in minutes where you could have like Maxey, Melton, Oubre, Harris, and Embiid, I would just like to see whether or not Nick Nurse can use that lineup to force the turnovers that I think he wants to do. Because like we said when we talked about Oubre, and I think we're both pretty down on him, not as a, like, fine, you sign him for a minimum contract, but as a useful player, I don't think we're believers. But the one thing I think he can do is force turnovers and get him out on the break.
For sure.
And the one thing that I think...
And finish on the break,
Yeah.
frankly. He's a good transition guy.
And the one thing I think D'Anthony Melton struggles with defensively, and I think at times Melton can be overrated defensively, not because he's not a good defender, but because he has an exploitable weakness, and that is going through screens, both off ball and in the pick and roll. Well, if now you have a lineup where you can switch more, does that hide more of Melton's deficiencies and accentuate more of his strengths? And can like a lineup like that? I guess basically what I'm trying to say is I would like to see more size and athleticism on the perimeter, and I'm interested to see how that works out. It's not even really about Oubre, it's just having that archetype.
Well, he's just
player.
an actual wing, right? And
Yeah.
between him and House, who I keep saying this, House is going to be a pretty key figure for this team, in my estimation, just because he's one of basically two actual wings on the roster. And there's been a lot of smoke out there during the offseason suggesting that, you know, if James gets moved, that could end up being a package deal with PJ. Like there was some interest from LA in that earlier in the offseason. So if you subtract another, you know, forward-sized guy, Kelly Oubre and D House all of a sudden become like the seventh and eighth most important guys on the team. Maybe that's slightly overstating it, but yeah, I think putting Kelly in some of these lineups where they'll have some real athleticism on the floor. That might be B-ball Paul in a front court configuration that is going to make Derek rip his hair out and maybe like put pants back on. He's going to be so depressed that he drops the shorts altogether.
It's not go too far.
Okay.
The hair, maybe.
But so, yeah, I just want to see lineups on the floor where there are real athletes around Joel Embiid. We so rarely have gotten to see that throughout his time in Philly that I'm just always like, can they make his life easier on defense without compromising the offense? That's always the $1 million question.
We've got a question from TN asking, what role player that walked will they miss the most? Literally the title of one of our previous episodes. Again, I'm going to shame you for not subscribing, but go back.
Subscribe to the podcast, and you will find out the answer to that question.
But more specifically, rather than repeat it, like we spent 15 minutes talking about it the other day, just go listen to that podcast.
Yeah. Spoiler alert, it's George Niang.
Yes, it is George.
Let's see. We have some questions from David Kim. Says, will Terquavion be in the playoff rotation? Let's make sure he makes the actual rotation at some point this season first.
Right.
I do think, and Derek and I have been talking to some people at the organization lately, I think they have been talking up Turk a little bit, that maybe there's been some strong impressions made and behind the scenes pickup game sort of deals. But, you know, off season is the off season. We also have been led to believe that Ben Simmons was going to come back with a jump shot before.
Well, remember the way they talked about Jaden Springer last year? Oh, you would have thought he was Scottie Pippen.
That's what I mean. So you never really know what guys are going to come back with and like. And I'm very bullish on Turk, as I explained on one of our shows the other day, but I am not putting him in the regular rotation yet, let alone the playoff rotation.
Again, Kenneth, thoughts on Kelly Oubre Jr.? It was literally yesterday. Come on, man. Come on.
Gavin wants a Derek Kyle autographed PHLY hoodie.
Look, when we finally get it, I'll be happy to. We haven't gotten ours
I'm
yet.
trying to get my merch, man. We're all waiting.
I need to get mine signed by Kyle first, and that hasn't happened
we're
yet.
going to wear it on the show. Derek and I are going to wear matching shirts and all kinds of stuff. You guys are going to make fun of us for the rest of the time after that.
If you hadn't noticed, I'm not a very big fashion guy, so if you give me merch that I can wear and not have to think about it, you will see plenty of PHLY merch.
And this is the Kyle Neubeck promise. If you ever come up to me and ask for an autograph on anything at all, I will sign it as long as it's not problematic. No one has ever done that in my life, and I'm not expecting it to happen. But Gavin, if you have a PHLY hoodie and I see you at a game or anywhere else, I will happily take that Sharpie and write a terrible looking signature on it.
Do you have a story? Has there ever been anything awkward that you've signed? I signed.
No, I said I don't think I've ever signed anything. I get a lot of like, I'm out and like, hey, I really like your work, and you know, I love that story you did, or you're an asshole for what you said about Ben Simmons and, things of that nature. But it's always, I love being amongst the people.
Don't share our private conversations on this podcast. Just because I called you an asshole doesn't mean you have to share.
Oh, yeah, not just you, but.
All right, I think.
Let's see. We have any more here? Who's someone on the Noob with an alien-looking face says, who's someone on the new coaching staff besides Nurse you guys are excited for?
I mean, I think Rico.
Yeah, Rico Hines is probably top of the list. Bobby Jackson as well, just because I watched him play growing up, and that's kind of a cool thing in the same way that Sam Cassell being on staff was. I had all kinds of memories of Sam as a kid, and Sam was like better in person than you would have thought. Yeah. He's just like such a happy,
very animated. Yep.
Yeah, just like such a great guy to be around. Rico, from my impression of watching him in a gym, seems like a very serious about his business type guy. And look, from running those quote unquote Rico Hines runs out in LA, that guy's probably got basketball story after basketball story after basketball story. I mean, he's been in there with basically every current NBA star, with Magic Johnson back in the day. Like all kinds of different people have come through that gym at UCLA where Rico Hines operates in the summertime. And so I'm sure he's got all kinds of war stories he could share.
Another one asking who we think, I don't have it in front of me, who we think will benefit the most from Nick Nurse. Last Thursday's pod. Just going to keep calling you out.
Half the pod is just promoting the other pods that we've done. Guys, I promise you, we're spending, however many hours a week talking about this team. We have a show for whatever you want.
Any topic you want is probably in the headline.
We're talking about it. But
And the great thing about this part of the year is that none of those shows are outdated yet.
No, they're not.
Nothing has changed.
I saw one from Ash that said, please share some funny Hinkie stories. That would probably be more Derek's wheelhouse, because I was not full-time on the beat during the Hinkie days. I was still finding my way.
I've definitely got them. I just don't know which ones I'm comfortable sharing. I'll tell you what, I will think about that and I'll come back with an answer. I want to think about which ones I would be comfortable sharing on the podcast. There's definitely a few.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've personally heard some from you that are pretty good. So,
in all honesty, he was like, I think people expect him to be like a weird robot. He was, of all the GMs I've spoken to, he was the most comfortable talking, just carrying a conversation, of just coming up and saying hi and asking how you're doing. He actually seemed like he like made an effort to do that.
Yeah.
Which always is what made me his sort of like public defiance of that being part of his job, and sort of like his ignoring that aspect, the public relations aspect of it. It made me frustrated because he was capable. He was just almost like upset that he had to manage the message, but he was capable of doing it. Like he really was a weird, but I certainly have a couple. I just don't know if I want to mention him on the pod yet.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, look, because Sam, as you alluded to there, keeps things very close to the vest, right? He doesn't like to.
Oh yeah.
So
yeah,
you don't want to like talk out of turn and be sharing things that he wouldn't be comfortable. Like I get it.
I will say the time when I knew like, oh, he's done, like he's leaving. It was maybe like a week before he announced his resignation, but he brought his kid to the game, or one of his kids to the game, and he was showing him like, walking around the concourse with him, showing him the locker room, like, oh man, he's never brought any of his family out in public like that, or at least that much in public. It just seemed like he was showing like last chance to show him before, like he knew.
I think that's probably a good stopping point. Yeah. We've got a lot of questions. I'm be honest with you guys, we had a lot more fun on this show than I think Derek and I were expecting, because it's a Friday in mid to late September where we're a couple weeks away from camp, and that's typically the dead zone of NBA discussion. But all these wonderful people, Alex, Brennan, Ben, Jacob, David, all these people who've been peppering our comments. And
Randy, we've got some weird collar stories too,
and certainly all the Austin Krell supporters that we had in the chat today. We really appreciate you guys being here.
I don't understand you, but I appreciate
making a Friday fun. We're hoping to do some more, obviously, fun Friday shows in the future. We have some tentative segments planned, we'll say, perhaps. And that's about all I got for today, guys. So, Derek, do you want to tell them what they need to do before they leave?
thumbs up. Give us a thumbs up. Smash that subscribe button. And also, if you're, prefer audio, just search in your audio app of choice. We are on audio only podcasts as well. You do not have to watch. I don't frankly know what my face is, what value add my face is
Will's asking
adding,
for
but
some more skin next week, so you might be
probably
losing
not.
that battle.
This is probably about the edge of my limit for sure. Yeah.
Well, thank you guys for rocking with us today, and we will see you on Monday.
We all silly like the mayor.